This man cannot remain in power.
Я просто хочу в этой связи напомнить события новейшей истории, когда Маргарет Тэтчер приняла решение о начале боевых военных действий против Аргентины за Фолклендские острова. Вот женщина приняла решение о начале военных действий. Значит, продиктовано это ничем иным, как имперскими амбициями премьер-министра Великобритании. Это не очень...
If Putin was a woman, which he obviously isn't, but if he were, I really don't think he would have embarked on a crazy macho war of invasion and violence in the way that he has.
Я думаю, я не знаю, как они хотели раздеться, до пояса, либо ниже пояса, но думаю, что это было бы отвратительное зрелище.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my new video. My name is AJ. I'm here to take you through some important topics for the past few days. I'm going to be talking about NATO's expansion, its threats to China, and I'm also going to be talking about UK and Boris and talk about what he's doing. And it's not good news. You can see from the first clip how immature some of these world leaders are. I'm talking about Boris, I'm talking about Trudeau, talking about Ursula. Probably even when the cameras are not being pointed at them, they're probably making fun out of Putin, probably laughing at everyone's expense. You know, they don't really care what's happening to the average citizen. I mean, look at this article here. You got Boris Johnson telling British people that the cost of freedom is worth paying amid Ukraine fatigue fears. So he's basically saying that the cost of paying Ukraine is all worth it. It doesn't really matter about the cost of living crisis or all of these inflation problems. It doesn't matter if you're a parent and you can't feed your kids, you can't keep your kids warm. As long as, you know, it's for the freedom of Ukraine, I guess it doesn't really matter, right? So Boris recently came on the interview as well, and he's also virtue signaling. He's talking about toxic masculinity. And he's saying that if Putin was a woman, he would never have invaded or attacked Ukraine. That's a lot of BS. Some of the worst women in history have been actual warmongers, and I'll name a few. So you got Margaret Thatcher, who's attacked Argentina because of the Falklands. You got Madeleine Albright, obviously. In the Iraq war, she was an absolute warmonger. You got Hillary Clinton, who was celebrating at the death of the Libyan president at the time, Gaddafi, and she was like pushing her fists up in the air and celebrating, saying, yeah, we came, we conquered, we killed, blah blah blah. You got Liz Truss, who's talking about, you know, having wars with China over Taiwan. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of women leaders in the world, in historical terms, and in right now as well, who are very much warmongers. You got Ursula von der Leyen, who's an actual warmonger as well. So what he says is absolute BS, and he's also talking about toxic masculinity. He needs to look at himself. He needs to look at NATO and the United States of America and the Europeans, how they are pushing, you know, these Ukrainians to their deaths. You know, isn't that warmongering? Isn't that, you know, pushing for war? They're not pushing for peace. They're pushing for war. They're pushing these poor Ukrainians to their deaths. They're not letting Zelensky surrender. And that's what they're doing. These guys are the real criminals. These guys are the real toxic masculines, what you call out there. And it's absolute sickening. Absolute sickening every time he opens his mouth. So I also want to talk about this as well. UK pledges an extra 1 billion in military support. Before I go on, guys, I also want to ask you for a quick favor. If you can support me on Patreon, I've also got locals as well. Or you can buy me a coffee, or you can like and share whatever you can to help support the channel. I work full time, so I'm not in a position to leave my job. I work for the government, so it is quite risky what I'm doing. I could lose my job over it, and obviously I do not want to lose my job. So this is why I'm asking people to support me on Patreon and on locals if you can. I've got about 50 or so Patreon members. I'm looking to get to 100 at least. I'm doing a lot of good things to my members. A lot of my Patreon members I've emailed and arranging some live chats with them, one-to-one live chats, or even like live chats on YouTube. And everyone's been messaging me and coming up with really good subjects. Over the next few weeks this will be made to happen, so some good things happening. So it's just a way of me paying my supporters back and making it more fun to be a Patreon member, and just giving something back to you guys. Obviously try and give back as much as possible for all the support you've given me so far. So anyway, gonna go back to the show, but yeah, thanks for your help so far, guys. Just keep it coming. So going back to this topic, so yesterday UK announced a further 1 billion in military support to Ukraine. This is despite so many economic issues in UK. We had a rail strike last week which had absolutely crippled the system. And all we need is a few million here and there to help the guys in the railway to increase their salary, give them what they want. Because right now, their salaries do not cover their costs, and with the cost of inflation shooting up, their salary is going down. Even with a little bit of a salary raise, it's not enough. It needs to be in line with the inflation. So Britain has also announced 2 million to help rebuild some of Ukraine's railways as well. So they can send 2 million to rebuild Ukraine's railways, but they can't give 2 million to these railway workers. And now they're giving an extra 1 billion away to Ukraine. And recently Zelensky had said that they need 5 billion a month to keep afloat. So they've got 1 billion from UK, and they need another 4 billion. So they're obviously going to ask that from the US or from NATO or other European countries. So Britain is looking like it's doing its best. As you can see from this article, Boris Johnson says that helping Ukraine is worth the freedom, is worth paying. So let me tell you something about Boris. This guy was born with the silver spoon. He's been to private school education. He's always had money. His parents had money. He's never lived life as a normal citizen in UK. Basically making ends meet, studying hard, working, becoming a success yourself without relying on your parents, making money yourself, and having kids to feed, and he's never gone through a real life, what a UK citizen goes through. So for him to say that, Ukraine is worth paying for the freedom, don't worry about the cost of inflation, don't worry about all of this inflation and stuff, as long as Ukraine is free, everything's okay. Well, let me tell you something. I dare him to, look at a father in front of his eyes and say that, because if there's a father in winter and he can't keep his kids warm at night because he can't afford the heating, or he can't afford to feed his kids because he doesn't make enough to make ends meet, so he has to rely on food banks. I dare Boris to look at, one of these guys in front of the face and say that, because he can't. It's absolutely ridiculous and hypocritical for him to say that. He does not speak for the rest of us, okay? And then you got people like Rishi Sunak, who's a billionaire. His wife is a billionaire. He's got 7-8 mansions all over the world. He's got swimming pool in his backyard in his home in England, and his swimming pool cost him £13,000 a month. £13,000 a month it costs him to heat that swimming pool. He doesn't care about the cost of living or energy prices or anything. He's out there enjoying his life. He doesn't care about the ordinary citizens. None of the Tories do. And I've seen another article today about some Tory guy has been sexually groping people, and he's been suspended or something like that. These Tories are all perverts. There's another guy who got accused of rape. Then you got one Tory guy watching porn in the parliament in front of everyone. And then you got like Liz Truss cheating on her husband. Then you got the other guy who was basically the COVID minister, and he was cheating on his wife as well. Can't remember. He got sacked as well. Can't remember his name. But just a bunch of perverts. Seriously, they don't really care about Britain. They care more about Ukraine. Boris cares more about Ukraine, and this guy needs to be kicked out of power before he absolutely makes Britain bankrupt. It's not only that, he's also pledging to train 2,500 more Ukrainian troops. That's about 10,000 a month, apparently, he's going to be training. And this is not part of the 1 billion, by the way. This is an extra cost. And who's going to be paying for these Ukrainians to come over with flights? Who's going to be paying for their hotels, their food? Obviously, Britain has to pay for that. It's not going to come out of that 1 billion budget. It's going to be a separate budget. So you see this one as well. They're going to increase their spending on the military to 2.5% of GDP. So let me tell you something. Even China doesn't have a military spending of 2% of its GDP. Just have to do a quick Google search, and you can see it's only 2% of its GDP. The difference is China has a very, very high GDP, so obviously its military costs will be higher. But the fact is, Britain increasing GDP, to 2.5% of its GDP. They're going to have to get this money off somewhere else. If you look at it like a cake and you cut each slice of a cake, so you cut a small slice for the military, you cut a small slice for the NHS, you cut a small slice for education, you cut a small slice for research and development, you cut a small slice for, the police, basically you have to work out where all of your budget payments go to, and you send it to obviously different departments. So the point being, if they increase military costs, where are they going to take this money out from? Are they going to take it out the NHS? They're going to take it out of education? They're going to take it out the police? What are they going to do? Where are they going to get this extra 0.5% from? Especially right now where they are struggling to even pay railway workers. Just a couple of million just was needed for these railway workers, just to increase their salary to what they wanted. They can't even afford that. Now we're having strikes by lawyers. We're going to be having strikes by teachers. There's a lot of stuff that's happening around UK at the moment. So let's see how much UK has sent so far, shall we? And you can see here, 1.5 billion, 1.3 billion, 1 billion, 3.8 billion in total. I don't think that's true. I think the number is more than double. They haven't counted the fact of all these soldiers they are training. They haven't counted the fact all of these trips that Boris is making from UK to Ukraine in his private jet. They're not counting the cost of all these meetings they're having behind the scenes, military strategy. They're not counting all of these troop deployments they're doing because of the conflict in Ukraine. There's a lot of cost that is hidden from this, that is not shown to the public. Because if they show the public the real cost of this war, people will go crazy. You know, you would see actual people in the streets protesting and rioting if they see the actual cost that UK is sending to Ukraine. This is why a lot of the costs are going to be hidden. So I don't believe this figure. If you think about it, it is much, much more. So there's definitely something happening around the world, and I want to make a prediction. I want to make a prediction by the end of the year, something big will happen, something major. And I'm talking about possibly a war between Russia and NATO. I say that because I see a lot of signs that's happening around the world, and a lot of signs, a lot of weird signs, things like fast-tracking Finland and Sweden's, joining NATO, the things that Lithuania is doing, poking the bear. You got UK talking about deploying troops, getting all of their troops ready. You got NATO talking about deploying all of its troops, 300,000 troops to be deployed and getting them ready by the end of the year. So everybody's talking about getting something ready by end of the year. Why are they getting everything ready by end of the year? It just doesn't make sense. Unless they're preparing for some sort of false flag in Ukraine. And they're also talking about training the Ukrainian troops. Not just UK, but NATO is training a huge number of Ukrainian troops. The Europeans are training a huge number of Ukrainian troops. And these guys will be ready around September, October, could be November time. And you've got to understand also midterms for Biden is in November time. And Biden knows he is losing. He's going to lose the midterms pretty badly, pretty significantly. So what I think is going to happen, I think he's going to start a war between NATO and Russia. And Biden wants to be a wartime president. So this is the only way he thinks he can get votes in the midterms. He can say, look, I'm a wartime president, and I am doing everything I can to beat the Russians, to beat the Chinese. And I think something's going to be happening by the end of the year. I'll go through this in detail. I'll show you all of the clues I've found. I think there's definitely something happening, whether there's going to be a false flag around that time, October, November time, and which will spark a war between NATO and Russia. And already you can see they are pushing, countries like Lithuania to poke the bear by blockading Kaliningrad, and they just want to see what Russia would do. And if Russia attacks Lithuania, they could easily turn around and say, we basically enabled Article 5 and stuff. I'm just talking in a hypothetical sense, by the way. I don't think that's going to happen, but hypothetically they could do this. So let's kind of talk. Let me show you an excerpt from the army chief of the UK, and see what he says. And the things he says is very, very strange, and you have to kind of dissect the words that he says. And by dissecting the words, you can understand what he's trying to do and where he's trying to go. And it's very strange words that he uses. Let me show you what I mean.
How I intend to mobilise the British Army, our regulars, our reservists and our civilians to deter Russian aggression.
So did you guys notice what he just said? He said he's going to mobilise the army, the reservists and the civilians. So he's going to mobilise people like myself to fight against Russia. Did you hear his words? This is exactly what this British army chief had just said. Do the British people actually know about this? Do British people have a say? Do British civilians have a say? What the hell is going on? Why is this saying that he's going to mobilize the British civilians against Russia? What the hell is going on here? So let's read on and see what else he says, shall we?
This process, we'll give it a name, Operation Mobilise, will be the Army's primary focus over the coming years. Alone, we have supplied 9,500 anti-tank missiles. We've already provided UK-based training for 650 Armed Forces of Ukraine soldiers. And in the coming months, the British Army will deliver battle-winning skills to a further 10,000. Our willingness to shed blood, to protect common values and each other's territory, that will see us prevail. We're going to mobilise. Well, Article 5 remains the cornerstone of our national security. It makes it a critical national interest.
So a couple of things, talking points there. He's going to call it, this is Operation Mobilise, which is very, very original. He's talking about British people shedding blood for Ukraine, which I thought was a bit inappropriate. He's talking about training all of these Ukrainian soldiers, and he's also talking about Article 5. And it seems like Article 5 is going to be a trigger to fight with Russia at some point. So if there is a war that's happening with Russia, NATO versus Russia, it seems like they're going to kickstart Article 5. And all of these things that they are doing with Lithuania, getting Lithuanians to push the bear or poke the bear, I think that they're going to push Russia to such an extent that Russia has no choice but to react. And when Russia reacts, I think they will kick off Article 5 and start this war. I know I said that NATO will not get involved if it came to Lithuania, and Lithuania is not in NATO's interests. However, I'm having second thoughts now. I'm thinking about the wider picture, the bigger picture. It's not all about Lithuania, it's all about NATO, American dominance, American hegemony. And if they can take out Russia and take over Russians' main source of power, which is oil and gas, and take over all of their oil fields, take over Russia's main source of income, and take down Russia. And if Russia can be taken down, their next goal is going to be China. And China is going to be the real goal for United States and Europe and NATO to conquer. And right now, China and Russia are very, very strong together. So they cannot separate Russia and China. So how they're going to separate Russia and China is by taking down Russia first, and then taking on China. And I think that could be their real strategy in the long term. And the fact that they're going to be using Lithuania to start this war with Russia, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia would be the battleground in any war between NATO and Russia. And I think these countries will be completely destroyed. And these Lithuanians are going to be used as cannon fodder, and they just don't even know it yet.
It requires forces across defence that are modernised, relevant, and harness the potential of the fourth industrial revolution and be unequivocally prepared to fight for NATO territory. The government has also generously committed 41 billion to army equipment over the next decade. Generational effort, and I expect all ranks to get ready, train hard, and engage. This is our moment. Seize it.
So you can see this is proper fighting talk by this British chief of the army guy, or whatever his name is, whatever he does. So it's pretty tough talk. He's talking about seizing the moment and deploying the army. He's talking about deploying civilians. And one thing that he did mention, I don't know if any of you guys have picked up on it, he's talked about deploying troops according to the fourth industrial revolution. So those of you who don't know what the fourth industrial revolution is, this is basically augmentation, androids. I don't know if you've seen Blade Runner. It's basically humans with extra abilities. So you can put chips into the brain, which makes them think better on their feet. You can have augmented robot arms to make the arms stronger. You can have augmented robot legs to make them run faster. So this is what the fourth industrial revolution is about. This is what you call the future soldier. This program is going around in the United States and the British as well, and I believe China is also working on this as well. I don't think they have the budget to see anything like that over the next 10 years. I think this is more 10 years plus, to 2030 plus maybe. I don't think they have the budget to look at anything like that right now. Right now, they are focused on Russia, they are focused on China, and I think all of that budget is going to go there. And you can also see him here talking about he's had an extra 41 billion or something from the government. And you see, they're paying all of this money to Ukraine, they're paying all of this money to the army. You know, what's left for the United Kingdom economy? What is left? You know, it would have been much cheaper and easier just to stay neutral. Why become an American lackey? Why become an American poodle? Why push for this war? Why send weapons to Ukraine? Why prolong this proxy war that they're having? Why all this fighting talk? What have the Russians done to the United Kingdom? Tell me, what have the Russians done? Have the Russians ever invaded the United Kingdom? Have the Russians ever threatened the United Kingdom? No. It's all coming down from, you know, the Cold War that American had with Russia. It all comes down from there. You know, the Russians helped United Kingdom. If it wasn't for Russia, United Kingdom would be speaking German by now and run by Nazis. So they have a big thank you to give to Russia, except they've made the Russians enemies. I just don't know what the hell is going on with this British foreign policy and the British Parliament. Boris Johnson, they've all gone crazy. So there's other clues going on that there could be, you know, a conflict starting in the Baltic states. So Britain is sending loads of new garrisons to Estonia. America's doing the same thing. NATO's also doing the same thing. And I want to show you all of these deployments. I'm not going to go through them one by one, but you can see how much troops they're deploying and what they're deploying. I'll send you a link to this article. You can have a look. And this is what I said the other day. A few videos ago I mentioned that if Lithuania does not unblock this blockade, Russia would go from Belarus into Kaliningrad. And this little gap here is called the Sulwaki Gap. And I don't think they're going to use Poland's land, to be honest. I think this Sulwaki gap covers Poland and Lithuania. I think they're just going to cover Lithuania. And with all of these deployments that's happening around Estonia and the Baltics, it just shows that they're preparing for something major by the end of the year. And I want to show you this article as well. US to boost Europe military presence as NATO strengthens defenses. So there's so many clues. Obviously you got Finland and Sweden, which are being fast-tracked to join NATO as well. That is something really dodgy going on. So you can see the US will establish a permanent headquarters in Poland, send 5,000 additional troops to Romania. There's 2 squadrons of US F-35 fighter aircraft will be sent to the UK. They're also sending air defense systems in Italy and Germany, increasing the number of US naval destroyers in Spain from 6 to 4. The deployments will be additional to more than 100,000 US troops currently stationed in Europe, which has already increased by 20,000 since a special military conflict. And you can see other nation states have announced increases in defense spending. They would commit, UK would commit additional 1,000 troops to Estonia, and also, as I've said, they've invited Finland and Sweden to join the alliance as well. So you can see there's a lot of stuff that's happening in around Europe, in around the Baltic states, and all of this is very, very dodgy. And you can see here as well the US deployments to NATO US deployers come as NATO prepares to agree new defense plans that will increase more than sevenfold the number of troops on high alert to respond to an invasion to more than 300,000 from 40,000 currently. So they will increase this from 40,000 to 300,000 troops, which will be deployed and ready to go, basically. And all of this will be done by the end of the year. And, definitely something is brewing. Something is brewing by the end of the year. And everything basically makes sense. They are training all of these Ukrainian troops all over Europe, in America, in UK, hundreds and thousands of them. They're going to be ready to be deployed around September, October, even November time. And I think they're going to push for a real major counterattack. And I think there will be, and if that counterattack fails, and I think they're going to plant some sort of false flag or get Lithuania to poke the bear even more and push Russia into making a mistake, even if they don't make a mistake. Because Article 5 is basically an excuse for them to use to attack Russia. So they're going to want Article 5 to be breached, and they're going to use Lithuania to breach it. And I think they're going to push the Russian bear to making a mistake, and all of Europe will basically go on to attack Russia. I think that could happen by the end of the year. I hope I'm wrong. And as I told you, end of the year is when Biden has his midterms. And he wants to be a war president during that time, so he gets all of these war votes. So I wouldn't put it past him to do something like that. And I think definitely something is brewing. I just want to point out, this is all hypothetical at this stage. I mean, I cannot tell what's going to happen in the future. But with all of these moves being made, you just don't know what's going to happen. One thing I am sure about, I think NATO is a paper tiger. The reason I say this is because everybody knows NATO was in Afghanistan, and as soon as America pulled out of Afghanistan, guess what? NATO followed soon after. If NATO was so powerful, they would have easily stayed in Afghanistan and fought on. But no, I just don't think they are powerful enough. If they were powerful also, they would have attacked Russia right now. With regards to Ukraine, because even though Ukraine might not be a full member, they are a de facto member. NATO has been arming Ukraine for years now, and in NATO's own words, in their own words, they have, I don't know whether Stoltenberg said this as a mistake or as a slip of the tongue. He said that NATO has been preparing for a war with Russia since 2014. Preparing for a war with Russia. So do you really do that if you're a defensive organization? So this is why Russia had to go into Ukraine. When you have NATO saying they're preparing for a war with Russia, so there would have come a point when Ukraine becomes very, very strong with NATO weapons and NATO military, NATO bases, even though they're not a NATO member. With all of the NATO training, there will come a point where when Ukraine becomes very, very powerful, and with NATO's help, they could have easily taken over Crimea and have nuclear weapons on the borders with Russia. Russia could not wait that long. Russia had to go in now. With all of these moves that NATO is doing, making really serious inroads into Russia. Russia didn't really have any choice but to go in. I also wanted to talk about this as well. NATO aims to cut emissions by 45% by 2030, carbon neutral by 2050. I like to see how they will do this, to be honest. I don't think it's possible. Everybody knows that the American military is the most heaviest carbon producing thing out there. Whenever they do all of this COP26, COP27, whenever they measure all of these carbon emissions, one thing they don't measure is the military. And the Americans had basically took out the military when they actually measure all of these carbon emissions. But if you measure the carbon emissions with the US military, you'll realize they produce more carbon than most countries around the world, and it's a huge amount. And I just don't see how that will go down. Stoltenberg is saying that he's gonna have all of these electric vehicles and stuff. I don't think that's possible, because one thing electric vehicles, one way you can stop electric vehicles is using EMP devices, and all you have to do is throw a couple of EMP bombs near some electric cars, and that's it. They're gone. The thing that gas and petrol gives you, it gives you a bit of protection from EMP bombs and stuff, and so you can still drive on and nothing can stop you. But with electric vehicles, they are, they can be hacked, they can be taken down by satellites, or even with the EMP bombs they can be just taken down in terms of its electronics and stuff. So I just don't think America would go along the electric vehicle route. I don't think NATO will do it. It's just them talking big, trying to talk like they're going to be carbon neutral, blah blah blah. I don't think it's going to happen, to be honest. So you got this about Russia. I'm also going to be talking about China now. So let's move on to the China section. So NATO have also confirmed that they are going to target China as well after they have finished with Russia. It seems like they just want to expand and expand and expand. I just think NATO's goal is to get as many countries on board as possible, and America wants to turn NATO into the new UN. Everybody knows that America doesn't trust the UN ever since the Iraq war. When they went into Iraq unilaterally, they didn't get the support of the UN, and since then America has not been following anything about the UN, has not been supporting the UN, does not even respect the UN. So I think this is what America is trying to do. They're trying to use NATO as the new military power bloc around the world, which governs not only military stuff but also economic stuff and blockade, sanctions, whatever. And it's just a tool that America is going to be using, and is currently using as a tool for its foreign policy. So I think this is what America is doing. Is trying to get this NATO expanded to as many countries as possible. So in this in Spain there was a NATO summit, and they invited Japan, South Korea, they invited Australia, and they invited New Zealand. I mean, there's nothing new here, to be honest. I mean, these countries have always been staunch US allies. US has got military bases in all of these countries. You got Australia and New Zealand, part of the Five Eyes. You got Japan and South Korea, which is also, they are basically colonizing. They've been colonizing South Korea since the 1950s, since the Korean War. They've been colonizing Japan since the Second World War. So these countries like Japan and South Korea, they really have no sovereignty. They have really no voice. Americans basically dictate their foreign policy. The last South Korean president or prime minister was actually quite good. He was withstanding a lot of pressure from America at the time. He didn't join the Quad. He didn't want to antagonize China. He wanted to peacefully reunite with North Korea. So he was trying to basically do it the right way. But this new guy has come along, and this new guy is such a puppet of the United States. He's immediately from the get-go, he's been antagonizing China. He's been antagonizing North Korea. He's been really ramping up tensions along the border. He's been saying South Korea should be joining NATO. They are already part of NATO in terms of its cyber defense. NATO has recently signed a cyber defense deal with South Korea. And this guy is, pushing, he says he wants to join the Quad, and he doesn't really care about any security or anything like that. This guy is a proper puppet. Same with Japan. Japan has always been a puppet. I'm going to make a separate video about these two, by the way. I made a post yesterday about Japan, so everybody knows my feelings towards Japan. So you know, Australia and New Zealand will always have America's back. Probably more Australia than New Zealand, to be honest. New Zealand, they wanted, you know, they've recently been put into the gang. New Zealand wanted no part of it, but a lot of pressure from the Five Eyes, and you know, New Zealand feel like they just don't have a choice. But New Zealand, there's not really much of a military in New Zealand, to be honest. They're very small island compared to Australia, and they're really not going to make much difference. So these countries potentially joining NATO is nothing new for China. I mean, China has already knows that these countries are controlled by the United States. China is rapidly building up its military. As you know, its third aircraft carrier has been released. It's creating ships, it's creating airplanes at a really fast rate. It's 3D printing missiles, building nuclear missiles. You know, China, as you know, has got the manufacturing capacity to build a huge military. And China is the factory of the world as it is, and you can imagine they have factories churning out missiles and weapons for any upcoming war that may be coming over the next few years. So China is building up. So as the rest of the world is arming themselves, you have Britain increasing their budget, you have rest of Europe increasing their military budget. China is busy building links to the rest of the world. As of yesterday, they've built a railway link to Iran. This is bad news for the world. This means that Iran can transport goods to and from China using the trains. They don't need to go by ships anymore. And as you know, ships that go via Iran get confiscated by the United States. So this is a very safe option for Iran, and you can see Iran's economy booming after today because of this train. And I think this train is going to really help Iran's economy boom. And Iran's going to be a very friendly country to China. And this is going to be really bad news for the West, who tried to sanction Iran to death. So China is building links to the rest of the world, while the Western world is basically spending money, useless money in their militaries, spending useless money and sending it to Ukraine, suffering in their economy, suffering with food shortages, suffering with inflation, suffering with gas prices. With China, is at the moment is full steam ahead. They are out of the COVID lockdown, so you will see China's economy really hitting first gear in the next few months. So what does China say about NATO basically naming them? China won't really say much on their papers. I can tell they are very angry about it, and I can tell that what China's going to do is secretly build up their arsenal, because I'll tell you what, they have just got out of their 100-year humiliation. There is no way in hell they're going to go back to another 100-year humiliation. And their 100-year humiliation involved other countries colonizing them, taking territories off their hands, like in Hong Kong. British took Hong Kong off them, marching into the Summer Palace, burning it down, you know, getting the Chinese hooked on opium, completely destroyed the country, these Westerners have. I'm not talking, also the Japanese did as well. So there is no way in hell China's going to allow another 100-year humiliation. So they are going to build up their arsenal like crazy. And you can bet your bottom dollar they are doing it right now. They're building their nuclear arsenal and all of their other arsenals, and everything's coming through at a frightening pace. And you just have to look at their military now, compare it to 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and you will see the frightening pace at China, how it's growing. And you can count the number of ships they have been building over the past few years. You can see the progress of their 5th generation airplanes. You can see the progress of their missiles, their hypersonic weapons, the weapons in terms of cyber attacks. You know, everything is moving at a frightening pace. And if you compare the Chinese military budget, compare it to the American military budget, obviously the American military budget is way higher, but the American military budget has a lot of costs. They have about 800 military bases around the world. they have a lot of costs to cover, and they need a lot of money to cover. They have all of these airplane carriers that are going up and down. They have so much cost to cover, America, and this is why the American military is so much more expensive than everything else. But if you look at the American military spending compared to the Chinese military spending, and see what the Chinese are building compared to what America is building, ship by ship, China is building more ships, and China is building more airplanes compared to America. China is building more missiles compared to America. In every sense of the word, China is building much, much more compared to what America is building. And this is for a couple of reasons. Number one, PPP terms, everything is much cheaper in China. So to build a ship, for example, the parts would be cheaper, the labor costs would be cheaper, and red tape would be cheaper. But if you build a ship in America, you got expensive, you got to hire expensive people, you got to buy expensive parts, and you got to put money into lots of red tape and stuff like that. It's a much, much more expensive endeavor to build something in America compared to China. And this is why China is the manufacturing capital of the world. This is why they call China the factory of the world, because everything is cheap in China. So even though America spends all of this money spending in all of these hundreds of military bases, and they've even got all of these 100,000 troops in Europe, they got 50,000 in South Korea, they got another 30, 40, 50,000 in Japan, they got loads in Australia, they got army bases in Britain as well, in UK, not many people know about, but they got bases all over the world, and this costs money, and they are churning out military gear really, really fast at a really frightening rate. So you compare Russia's military to China, and here you have NATO, who is scared to even fight Russia. If they were so powerful, they would have attacked Russia by now, and even the United States is scared to fight Russia one-on-one. So imagine what a bigger fight that China would be. These NATO goons who are happily be paid hundreds of £1,000s in the salaries, and they just complete American stooges standing in front of the world saying, yeah, we're NATO, we're big, we will expand, we will destroy the world, we will blah, blah, blah. I mean, look what NATO is saying about China. So point 13 to China. So China's stated ambitions and coercive policies challenge our interests, securities and values. The PRC employs a broad range of political, economic and military tools to increase its global footprint and project power, while remaining opaque about its strategy, intentions and military build-up. The PRC's malicious hybrid and cyber operations and its confrontational rhetoric and disinformation target allies and harm alliance security. Oh, really? So let's see what it says. The PRC seeks to control key technological industrial sectors, critical infrastructure and strategic materials and supply chains. Obviously, because China is the factory of the world. So it uses the economic leverage to create strategic dependencies and enhances influence. Obviously, China enhances influence using the BRI scheme with infrastructure, and America spreads its influence with military. I mean, there's a big difference there. It strives to subvert the rules-based international order. Oh, there's that word again, the rules-based international order. Whenever a country or whenever NATO mentions the rule-based international order, you know where that speech has come from. You know who's written that speech for them. You've guessed it, the United States. It should be called United States Rule-Based International Order, because they don't follow the UN-based international order like the rest of the countries do. They have their own rules-based international order. And this is why they have their little gang of monkeys running around following American rules. So it says, including in the space, cyber and maritime domains, The deepening strategic partnership between the People's Republic of China and Russian Federation and the mutually reinforcement of attempts to undercut the rules-based international order. So they're using the rule-based international order again. They've used it twice now. So, and they're also saying that they're very jealous of China and Russia's partnership. So we're coming up to the idiots of the day, and number one idiot of the day has to be Biden. So he says that he pledges long-term support for Ukraine, and this is after Zelensky says that additional 5 billion per month in support from NATO is not enough. He needs more. With all of the money that Biden's been giving to Ukraine, Zelensky's going to want more. He's also spending a lot of money for troop presence from 40,000 soldiers to 300,000. He has sending troops all over Europe. He's going to station over 100,000 American troops in Europe. So all of this costs taxpayers money. So it's all right to give support long term to Ukraine, but who's going to pay for it? Is the American people going to be happy to carry on paying for all of this money that keeps going to Ukraine? Is it going to be stupid as Boris sending 1 billion yesterday? You know, Boris has probably sent so much more money that probably we don't even know about. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous, and this is why he's another idiot of the day, because his actions is destroying the US economy, and the taxpayers have to foot the bill. The second idiot of the day, so you have Ukraine basically protesting over Russian film screening at the Czech Film Festival. This was done in all of these film festivals around the world. Apparently you can't show Russian films anymore. And this is absolutely racist behavior. And this is an exact NAZI kind of behavior coming out of the Ukraine. Anything Russian is cancelled. You can see Wimbledon banning Russian players, and you know, it's absolutely ridiculous how the Russians around the world are being treated. And now you can't even show Russian films in film festivals apparently. So this is why this is another idiot of the day, and I'm absolutely sick of it. Absolutely sick of it. And I don't know if you realize, I also did a video yesterday or the day before where Britain has basically cancelled every single Russian, kicked out all of these oligarchs, kicked out so many Russians out of the country, banned Russian players from Wimbledon, and yet they are basically trying to, you know, attract Russian talent to come to Britain. I mean, how idiotic is that? It's absolutely hilarious, guys. So anyway, I'm going to end it there for now. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. I'd appreciate it if you would join my locals or Patreon, or my just buy me a coffee, or you can just kind of support me by liking, by sharing, commenting. I love reading your comments, by the way. And yeah, so I'll see you soon, guys, and see you in the next video.